Alright, what's going on everyone? I'm SomeDevNamedSteve. Welcome to the third video in the Hello Unity Let's Make tutorial. So, in the last video what I did is I was able to show how to do player and camera movement. So now I have the player moving and the camera tracing behind the player. Now that I have that done, I also have jumping, and I'm able to jump and move at the same time. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show how to make collectible objects and then how to place them and how to be able to collect them. So, for this I'm going to be making a sphere. So I'm going to right click in hierarchy, and I'm going to create a 3D object of type sphere, and it has one right there for me. So I'm just going to move the sphere right about there. You don't have to place them exactly where I do unless you want to. I'm going to start off by scaling it down by about half on each axis. So 0.5, 0.5, 0.5 scale on the X, Y, and Z. Now I'm just going to double click on this to zoom in on it, and I'm also going to make a prefab, or not a prefab, sorry. I'm going to make a material, which it turns out I actually already made previously for purple. I just make it in the same way that I did for blue, cyan, green, and orange by right-clicking, creating material, and then changing the color up here. So I'm just going to drag and drop onto the sphere. And I'm also going to rename my sphere now to collectible. So what I'm going to do though, before I make this a prefab, is that I'm going to click this box here in the sphere collider in the inspector called is trigger. So I'm just going to click on that. And now what that means is that this is the trigger. So that means something will happen when it's automatically touching this object. So I'm just going to create a prefab, drag and drop again. And then I'm going to create 5 more just by dragging it in to the scene. This becomes very helpful when you're working with different scenes. You can use the same prefab in multiple scenes, and I'll be able to show how to do multiple scenes in a future Let's Make, but for now we're just going to be doing one, and I'm going to just be placing these somewhere throughout the board here. Okay, so now I have the object set up. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding something here called a tag to all of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this. I'm going to press and hold shift and then click on my last collectible. And then I'm going to go up to tag here. So a tag is essentially a way to identify something in Unity. So in this case, I'm just going to establish this as small collectible. And then now if after I make it, I go back to the inspector. And then for all of these, I'm going to click that again. I'm going to change the tag to small collectible, and now they all have the same tags. Now that I gave these the tag small collectible, I want to be able to pick them up or be able to count them somehow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my player movement script here, and then I'm going to say void on trigger enter, and then parentheses here, I'm going to say collider C. Now what this function does is that it will be called, so I'm going to say here, will be called once the player hits a trigger-based game object. Where now we have what happens when we hit a certain trigger. Now what we want to do is that we want to make sure it's the same name that we gave the collectibles here, which is small collectible. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if c.gameObject.tag. So if the tag of this game object, I'm going to say dot equals with a capital E, and then I'm going to say in here small collectible. I want this game object to go away. I want it to be destroyed. So what I'm going to say here is I'm going to say destroy, and it's going to destroy a certain game object. So I'm going to say c.gameObject. I want to have it destroy that specific object. So I'm going to go ahead, save this script. I'm actually going to save both scripts by doing Control-Shift-S. I'm going to just press play up here. And now you can see that I'm moving. I'm going to test this just by touching the object, and it automatically goes away. And as you can see, even in the inspector, it also goes away. So now we know it works. So now that we know we can collect it, and we have it essentially being triggered, we want to be able to track this. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add a score. So I'm just going to say private int score. So an integer also is a whole number. So just to start this out, I'm going to set the score equal to 0. And I'm going to add my respective comments where this will hold the score of the player, or essentially how many collectibles the player has gotten. And then I'm going to say here that the score is initialized. So when the scene is loaded, the score is made 0. So the score starts out as 0. So now I have that going. So now the score is equal to 0, and everything should be good. But the thing is, we don't exactly have a way to print it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start out by showing debugging. So now that we have this here, I'm just going to start out by printing the score. So I'm going to type print and then in parentheses score so we can see it in the debugging console. And we also want to just make sure that we're collecting all of them. So what I'm going to do is that in here, I know that if I collect one, I'm going to have my score go up by 1. So I'm going to say score plus plus. This is a shorthand way of saying, okay, I want the score to go up by 1. So what this is going to do is that it's going to have the score go up by 1, and then I want to print the score when the trigger is called. Now, obviously, this isn't how it's going to be in the end of the game, but this is how we're going to be testing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up console too. Just press the console tab. And then now that's open, I'm going to press play, and I'm going to see what happens. So we have our score initialized right now as 0. So now I'm just going to try and collect this object. My score goes up to 1. So that means that means by logic, I should be able to collect all of them. And I fell through, which that's something I will be able to fix, and I will be able to show that in either this video or in the next video. So by logic, I am able to collect everything. Now that I have that, it shows 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means we have all of our objects collected as shown. But now we also want to make a big object to collect. So I'm just gonna create another object. I'm gonna create a sphere, and I'm gonna give this the name big object. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm also going to give it the tag. I'm going to make a new tag by pressing plus. I'm going to give it the tag of big object. We don't want it to appear initially. We want it to appear after we collect all of these other objects. So now I'm just going to double click my sphere to zoom in on it, and then I'm going to give it the big object tag. And then I'm going to go to my materials, right click. I'm going to create a new material. I'll make this red. Now I just add that. And then I'm also going to scale it. I'm going to give it 3. Actually, not 3. I'll do 2.5. No, not 205. 2.5. 2.5 and 2.5. So now we know we'll be able to collect this object as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm also going to be checking the score. But I'm going to check it inside of this here. So I'm going to say if score is greater than 5. So in this case, if the score is 6, then we can collect the big object. Yeah. And now I'm just going to add my comments here. So I'm going to say, just going to add that. So if we collect a small collectible, get rid of it and increment by 1. Get rid of it and increment score by 1. And then after we increment the score, we're going to check if the score is at least 6. So if it is less than 6, nothing happens. But if it is 6, then if it is at least 6, then we are going to be able to show that object. So what I'm going to do initially to start is that I'm going to add another game object here. I'm going to say public game object big object. Notice the camel casing here. The first part here is lowercase, and then I do capitalization after that. Because normally with C#, you start out by having a lowercase variable, for variables, and then uppercase for functions, so that you're easily able to denote it. So I'm going to have big object. I'm going to start out by just writing the comment here. This will get the big object collectible. Now that I have that, I'm going to say that I can't see it initially. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to say big object dot active is equal to false. So what that means is that I won't be able to see it at all. So I'm going to go back in here really quick. I'm going to save. Then I'm going to go here. I also forgot to add the trigger, so I'm going to say is trigger. So now I have the big object. So now I'm just going to go to let's see. I'm going to click on this. Yeah, I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to give this, and then I'm going to just give this the name again of big object. So now I'm going to test it. So now I'm not able to see it because I didn't set it as active. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say if I collect all 6, I'm going to activate this. So I'm going to start this out by saying I'm going to say big object dot active is equal to true. So this means that when the score is at least 6, we can collect the big object. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to open this, and then I'm going to collect all the objects. So now that I collected all the objects, this big object comes in, and that means we're able to collect it now, which when we touch it, nothing happens because we haven't programmed anything for it. But we at least know that we're able to get it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back into the script here, and I'm going to say if the object is the big object. So I'm going to say down here if c.gameObject.tag again. So c.gameObject.tag dot equals. So if this is the big object, so if we collect the big object, we want to be able to win. So big object, not bug object. Big object. The player wins. So we're just going to start that out by using a print statement, and then we're going to get into GUI in the next part. So I'm going to say big object, and then I'm just going to print you win. Nothing really big. So I'm going to add a semicolon, as I've been doing with the end of every line here, as you need to do that in C#. I'm going to save. Now that I'm back in the editor, I'm going to just play test this. And as you can see, initially there is no game object. I'm just going to go ahead and collect all these right now, and I'll cut to when I have collected them all. Now that I collected them all, as you can see, if I go in my console here, it shows the score. It shows how many I collected. Now I'm just going to go ahead and collect that big object. And if I touch it, it says you win. But it doesn't get rid of the object. That's because we didn't say to destroy it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to destroy do that destroy c.gameObject again. So I'm going to say destroy c.gameObject. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to get back to the state that we were in before. Okay, now that we have that game object, the big object there, I'm just going to collect it, and I by accident jumped too high, and it shows you win in the console. Yeah. Now before I go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I can't jump when I'm in mid-air. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if the player is on the ground, which we can do using tags again, but we're not going to be using onTriggerEnter. We're going to be using another function, void onCollisionEnter. So when the player collides with something, so when the player collides with a non-trigger game object, or essentially just a general collision. So I'm going to say onCollisionEnter here, and then I'm going to say collision C. And what I'm going to do is, I know that inside this function, I'm going to want it to make sure that I'm able to jump when I'm on the ground, but not when I'm in the air. So I'm going to start that out by just making this function, and I'm also going to go up here really quick and create a Boolean. So I'm going to say private Boolean, or not private Boolean able to jump. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave this as is. I'm not going to initialize it in here. But what this will do is that this will hold my ability to jump. So this variable will hold my ability to jump. So now we're just going to go in here and we're going to use the tags again. So I'm going to click on every single object here. I'm going to click on this, and this, all those 6 game objects. And I'm going to just go in and I'm going to make another tag for them. So we know it's all of the platforms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another one, and I'm going to call it ground. So I'm just going to highlight those again, and I'm going to give them all the tag of ground. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to say that on trigger enter. So if c.game, so I'm going to say if c.gameObject dot tag again dot equals, and I'm going to say ground. Then I'm going to make sure that the player is able to jump. So I'm going to say if player hits the ground, the player is able to jump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set able to jump equal to true. And then I'm going to have another one called on collision leave. So I'm going to say here on collision leave. So when the player exits a collision, right here. So then if the player jumps from the ground, the player is not able to jump. So we're going to say here able to jump is equal to false. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check if it's true. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to cut this out inside of the jump reach. I'm going to cut it. And then I'm going to say if able to jump is equal to true. You use double equal signs when you're comparing Booleans. And then I'm just going to paste that back in. So what this should be able to do by logic is saying that, okay, if we are able to jump, if we are grounded, then we should be able to jump. So I'm going to save the script and see how that works. Where I have an error here. So let's see, the error line 27 Boolean. Type or namespace Boolean cannot be found. Oh, because it's not Boolean in C#, it's bool. So I'm just going to save that. And then when I play test it, I shouldn't be able to jump when I'm in the air. So where I am still able to. Okay, so I put down the wrong function name here. So it isn't on collision leave, but it's on collision exit. So I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to go back up here. And now I'm going to check. I also added a print statement just to double check in here. So now I know that I'm able to see if I'm able to jump, which of course I'm now able to. And now I'm going to try and jump, and I'm only able to jump once. So now that I have that fixed, I'm going to fix the other part where if the player goes too far down, that I appear back up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the player, then I'm going to create an empty game object. What this is going to do, I'm just going to have this hold a transform or a position in this case. So I'm just going to say start position. So I'm going to say start position, and I'm going to move this out. I'm going to move this up just slightly, and I'm going to go, and then I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to check in the update function. I'm going to check if I'm below a certain y coordinate. So I'm going to say if transform.position dot y, since every single vector 3 has an x, y, and z, is less than -10. So I'm going to say here if the player's y coordinate is less than -10, bring the player to the start. And then it says that I don't have the object created. So I'm going to create another object up here. I'm going to say public. I'm going to say public game object start position, and then I'm going to say this holds the player start position and restart position, and that should do the trick. So I'm going to go here, save it, go back into Unity. So now that I'm back in the editor, I'm going to go back to the start position, add that in, and I'm just going to press play, and it's going to bring me back to the start position if I get below -10. So that's the very basics of this. So now we were able to collect objects, we're able to get that big object to show, and now we're able to show how to make the player win. So in the next and final video, I'm going to show how to make this with a GUI, or with a UI. So I'm going to be able to put the score up here, and then I can put another message somewhere else that says you win, maybe in the center or something like that. I don't know. But I'm going to show how to work with the Unity UI and the canvas for Unity. So thanks for watching. If you haven't already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe below, because I'm going to have a lot more videos other than this. And I'm definitely excited for some of the videos that I'm going to be doing. And then, as always, any scripts that I have are on GitHub. All the assets are on GitHub. Final game is going to be put on GameJolt and also potentially itch.io, but definitely GameJolt, and I'll have a link to that down below. But thanks for watching. I'm SomeDevNamedSteve. This was Let's Make Hello Unity Part 3, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.